Now, speaking briefly about what this session is going to be about, which is on reimagining leadership in the digital era. Today we're living in an unprecedented age, in the age of transitions, disruptions, chaos, and ambiguity. We all need leaders who can deal with this unprecedency. A leader cannot know it all, right? And I think the top-down approach is no longer really sustainable. In this new digital age, we require leaders who can bring more optimism. Right? We need someone who can show us light in this age of over-information and irrelevancy. Right? So during this session, we are going to cover topics on what are the transformational changes the new leaders of digital age should be focusing on. How to navigate through the right track in this era of multiple options. And most importantly, how to keep your calm and be patient in this journey. So these are some of the very significant questions we'll be covering. And I'm absolutely delighted to have Mr. Shakti Ghoshal with us today, who will be giving us a lecture for the next 1 hour on this topic. Mr. Shakti Ghoshal is an engineer and an MBA from IIM Bangalore and has close to 4 decades of corporate life experience in India and abroad. Mr. Ghoshal is a professional certified coach, mentor, and trainer and runs leadership and workshop cum coaching programs for organizations as part of his commitment to develop and upgrade leadership incubation globally. Mr. Ghoshal is a visiting professor at IIMs, Udaipur, Bangalore, and Kashipur. So, Mr. Ghoshal, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on board with us today. Thank you so much for your time, and we really look forward to engaging in this interactive session with you.
Thank you so much, Neha. It's always a pleasure, interfacing with you, and it's also, I think, not only a pleasure but a privilege to be speaking to young minds. This is the future of our country, and so in any way, if we can add even a few nuggets of I wouldn't call it wisdom, but few nuggets of can do, would do, should do kind of mindset, I think that itself would be a big thing. Neha and other ladies and gentlemen, with your permission, I will start now. What I'll do is I'll run you through a structured PowerPoint, because that would sort of keep it fairly clued in terms of what we plan to talk about today. Beyond that, I am perfectly happy for anyone to sort of interrupt while so we don't have too much of time. So, but in case there is something which you need to talk about, by all means interrupt, and I'll be very happy to respond to you there. And then, however, beyond the session, Neha has very thoughtfully left about half an hour for us to sort of do a Q&A. So with Neha, your permission, can I start?
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, so I'll share my screen and somebody will have to tell me that you are able to see the screen. And once you tell me, then can you see my screen, please?
Yeah, your screen is visible.
Okay. So if you are able to see my screen, I will just, yeah. So, so as I said, it's a great privilege to do this session with you. Actually, the topic was given to me by Neha, but I thought it is extremely relevant. And so, reimagining leadership in the digital era. There are 3 words here, as you will notice, and 2 of them I have actually highlighted in different colors. Reimagining, leadership, and of course, digital era. Let's try and understand what each one of them actually signify for us. If you were to be looking at the dictionary definition of reimagining, and the Merriam-Webster dictionary defines it as to form a new conception of, to recreate. So it's all about conceiving and recreating. What is leadership? A great definition of leadership. We are not going to get into what leadership signifies or doesn't in a generic sense, but a great definition of leadership could be the ability to visualize, or basically visualization of and moving forward towards a future which was not going to happen anyways, or if I may use another word, otherwise. That future would not happen otherwise until and unless the leadership is able to visualize and move forwards towards. This is, I think, keep this particular definition of leadership at the back of your mind, because we'll come to it maybe again and again. To understand the digital era, I need to move to the next slide. And like I said, you can interrupt me anytime. Can you see some information data? And actually, this is maybe a little dated, and it's actually maybe more in terms of numbers. So I'm not going to read this slide out. But what I would like you to realize is that our world is increasingly granular. And why do I use the word granular? Because more number of players are entering every day. And there is an increasingly interdependence between these players, with all these things. So, emails, phones, Facebook, WhatsApp, all that stuff, and there are these more unknowable connections between all these players who are coming in. Information availability and sharing of that is 24/7 today. And it binds us, it binds all of us, whether we realize it or not, to create a global awakening of expectations. Earlier, if you were to go back 50 years, go back 100 years, go back a few hundred years, the thought process, the mindsets may not have been very different, but this particular aspect is binding together, which is leading to a global awakening of expectation, is very, very new. This is what the digital era really signifies. This is what the digital era actually is doing to us. Now, I like this particular, picture. Can you see there is this picture of an hourglass? You remember hourglass used to be used 100 years ago to determine time, right? So, a Danish physicist named gentleman called Per Bak, he was looking at this smooth flow of the sand going down from the top, very, very smooth, very regulated. And he tried to develop a theory of the sand, which is running, through an hourglass. And, to his surprise, he found that every sand grain, which is inside, the glass, is actually having invisible pressures and tensions from all sand grains around it and sand grains beyond. The internal dynamics of that sand pile, that reverse sand pile on the top, which you see, was so complex, you couldn't, actually put a model, couldn't bring in a physics theory to explain it. It was unknowable, totally unpredictable. I want you to look at this. It looks a very stable situation, but stability, as this hourglass shows, is just a passing phase. Instability in our era, just like this hourglass, is the only constant. I was listening to Neha, and she mentioned about words, volatility, unknowing, and we will get into those aspects, a little more detail. But please keep in mind, the digital era world is like this hourglass. We are actually moving from a world of problems. World had problems all along. And the problems always allowed mankind and our brains, either individually or together, to determine a solution. And we found solutions in almost all cases. However, the digital era is actually shifting the world from a world of problems to a world of dilemmas. We need to understand what is the difference between a problem and a dilemma. A problem allows me to look at my past experience and look at a situation based on my past and my having handled similar situations in the past to determine a kind of a solution or a way forward, a path. A dilemma, on the other hand, doesn't allow that. Dilemma is something which is so new. For example, let's take an example of the current pandemic. None of us who are living on this planet have an experience of the pandemic. When the internet came in, which was about, say, a little less than 30 years back, none of us knew what that internet would bring in. There were situations which created dilemmas. So it is a VUCA, and the VUCA stands for certain things. Some of you may be knowing it. Let's understand what is a VUCA word. VUCA was a word that originated from the US military. When they were getting into wars, they were finding things that were getting very complex. So what it actually means is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. 4 things. And it is this VUCA, these elements of the VUCA, is what creates the dilemmas in today's world. So there are, and each of these, let's try and understand, and we'll look at each of these things in a little more difficult ways. I'll show you pictures from 4 films, and many of you would have seen at least one, if not more, and some of you might have seen all the films. And if you can, some of you want to tell me what that film is, I'm happy to listen. So let's look at these. These are 4 films. Anybody recognizes this scene? Anyone?
Life of Pi.
Excellent, Art. Life of Pi. If you have seen the movie Life of Pi, as I've mentioned, you'll realize that nothing could have prepared the film's protagonist, Mr. Pai Patel, who's there, right there, to cope with the massive changes of being shipwrecked. The ship gets wrecked, losing his family, all of them get lost from the shipwreck, and then needing to learn to survive on a small boat with a Royal Bengal tiger. This is volatility, the nature and dynamics of this massive change. So let's look at another film. Anyone can tell me which film is this from? Anyone?
Gravity.
Gravity, absolutely right. Spot on. If this was a quiz, you would be winning hands down. So, okay. Yes, it's Gravity. Now, in the movie Gravity, the sheer uncertainty of what to do with no past precedents to go by, when the space station, that is a space station, as you see in the on this, gets hit by a meteorite rain, and in space confronts Dr. Ryan Stone. Dr. Ryan Stone is one of the people who were there in that particular space station at that point in time. Let's look at the third one. This one is a little tough. Anyone can? Inception. Absolutely. And Inception, as you see this picture, the whole, the world is, moving up and going above you. I mean, so, you are getting enclosed. As you can see, that street is rising, in the end. So Inception is all about the unknowable complexity of multiple forces that get unleashed in a dream, within a dream situation, which is what Inception is all about. That is complexity. The last one. I don't know. I'm sure some of you would have seen this. Okay, this is
Matrix.
Absolutely.
Matrix.
20 out of 20. Absolutely. So in the Matrix, it is all about the haziness of reality, and ambiguity is really about the haziness of reality. As one of the years, Morpheus offers the choice of red or blue pills to Neo, who is the film protagonist. So this is what volatility, uncertainty, unknowable complexity, the complexity and, ambiguity is all about. So, there's a very interesting thing. You'll find that successful leaders and very successful organizations consistently fail to anticipate or lead in VUCA created disruptions. Today is a world of disruptions. And, I'll give you so many examples. I don't know how many you remember in the last century, a company used to have 90% market share of photography. A company called Kodak, and Kodak suddenly ceased to exist. It happened end of last century. And there are enormous examples like Kodak. The Kodak moment with extremely successful organization, great management, but they failed. Why they failed? Because they failed to anticipate and lead in a VUCA created disruption, which is what happened when the digital photography came in. And the interesting thing is, it was Kodak really who was one of the pioneers of digital photography, but they still, could not capitalize on that. It was other organizations which did that. So look at this cartoon. This is what happens really. So in the cave days, and the people, they were pulling, this small cart with rocks, and they knew square wheels, and suddenly this fellow comes and says, look, these are round wheels. No, thanks, we are too busy. We are in our life too busy to really suddenly visualize and understand something new that is coming our way. This is why organizations which are so embedded in their processes, in their managerial systems, in their management, which is looking, which knows the mistakes that have been made in the past to see how one has to drive into the future, all this doesn't work. All this does not work, increasingly so in the digital era. All this is not going to work. Keep this particular perspective in mind. How does VUCA really impact? You will see, sorry, I think I have to move this out 1 minute. Yeah. So volatility creates fear, massive changes. So what does fear do? It makes us go to our basics, back to basics. But the back to basics is fundamentally from the past. So a back to basics approach does not work. Uncertainty, as all of us have faced, this causes some kind of a paralysis. And, we try and sort of put in more efforts to try and understand that uncertainty, get more and more data. It just doesn't work. Complexity is because it's so complex. We only try and look at things black and white, and we try to establish who are the scapegoats for this situation, rather than, trying to understand what needs to be done going forward. And ambiguity, of course, as you understand from the word, induces doubt, distrust, hesitancy. And this is why organizations and leaders and managers actually fail to handle VUCA situations. So if all this sort of is impacting us as we get into a VUCA situation in a disruption, what is it that we need to do? And this is what we are going to be talking about today, from now on. So to sort of summarize, digital era actually fuels disruptive innovations, as you know. And one sign of that, and I think you would know that the sheer, absolutely kind of a jumping of the MSME sector, the micro and the small, companies, enterprises, and the startups in today's world, phenomenal. And that is one of the manifestations, one of the symptoms. And so what the digital era actually does is technology, disruption, which further enhances and accelerates the impact of VUCA. This is something which we need to imbibe within us. The past is not going to be a guide to tell us how we should be handling a situation in the future. This is very counterintuitive because we are always being told, that your past experience, so you have got the skills and you have past experience, and I can say that, look, I have 40 years in the industry, and I've seen all kinds of situations, but my seeing all those kinds of situations may not help in the future. When we face something we have never faced before, and this is what VUCA does, and I want to take you through what actually happens. Our perspective, and please remember, it is our perspective which leads to our actions, right? So whatever we do, the way we behave, the way is how we are seeing a situation. So when we face a situation which is, we actually have never faced before. We are uncertain. First thing that comes to, we are uncertain, and the second thing that comes, we do not know. What do we do? And so we run to our bosses, run to somebody else, more experienced, say, look, what do we do? What happens is we start feeling disempowered, because our mind is only trying to grapple with this uncertainty and not knowing situation. It's like if I were to take you back to our 100,000 years back, when we used to live, or our ancestors to live in the caves, and suddenly this caveman comes out and the dark, and he wants to go somewhere, and he's not able to see anything, and he doesn't even know if a saber tooth is just there waiting to pounce on him. You feel disempowered in that situation, which does what? It leads you to make assumptions. You make assumptions. The saber tooth may not be here, or the saber tooth is 50 yards away, or something else. But that assumption is actually more a creation of my mind rather than based on any knowledge or information. So this is a soft trend. Why I call it a soft trend is it may be true, it may not be true. That's why it's a soft. Because we always like to understand through trends. We like to do a trend analysis in our mind, whether we realize it or not. All the time we are understanding based on certain trend and making sense or making meaning of something. And this obviously leads to a high risk strategy, which then leads to we start giving up even before starting. Because things are not going our way. And when that happens, we start blaming the environment, the volatility, the uncertainty, the complexity, the ambiguity in the environment. You would see this happening around you, in the digital era particularly. Things are changing. Suddenly I understand finance, but I suddenly am confronted with I need to understand blockchain technology. I say, look, I know accounts. I don't understand technology. Yeah, somebody wants to say something? Hello? Yeah, I heard something. Okay. So we blame the VUCA environment, and in the process, we ourselves get disrupted. So please look at this. This is what happens to all of us. This is also why those organizations failed, to understand the VUCA. Somebody wants to say something?
No, sir, that was just a glitch. It has been taken care of.
You're not able to hear me?
Can hear you, sir. You're completely audible.
Can I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why do we get disrupted? Let's try and understand why do we get disrupted. Because we keep on trying to predict. And I can tell you, I've been doing this all my life. I'm an engineer, and engineers like numbers, So until and unless I'm able to quantify something and I'm able to do some trend analysis, I'm not, and I would like to predict. And if I'm not able to predict, then I have a problem. We keep on, and I kept on working using probabilities. Whether you like it or not, a prediction is always based on probability. There is a higher probability of this situation happening. Because in the past, I could understand and I could see this. We keep on working on probabilities. We keep on trying to predict under situations which do not allow us to do that, and that is why we get disrupted. We need to therefore shift into a mindset of possibilities. Possibilities in a digital era. Very, very important. And please keep this in mind. A possibility, why is a possibility a possibility? A possibility is a possibility because somewhere in our mind we are certain about some aspects about what we are seeing. So we know some facts. So when there is some level of certainty and some level of we do know, what can happen is we need to shift into a mindset of possibilities. And how do we do that? Keep this in mind. There is some certainty which I have of some information and I know certain things. What I'm doing is I need to shift my mind, which is always playing with this large uncertain space and large do not know space, to whatever little space I have in my mind of what I know and what I'm certain about. If I get the ability, and we will see how to get that ability, we will learn this as part of this workshop, then Mr. Roy, I think it was Mr. Roy, there's a sound. Okay, we start feeling empowered, not disempowered feeling, because we have shifted into that space of knowing something and being certain about something. We start looking at hard trends. Technology is a hard trend. Technology, so that information, and there are several hard trends. Hard trend is something going to happen. That is going to happen based on that small information bit that I have about certain and what I know. And when that happens, I intuitively start taking a low risk strategy. I start gaining confidence and focus, and I start negotiating the VUCA environment, and we become disruptors. We are not the disrupted, we shift from that to become disruptors. This is what I would like to see in a very simplistic theory. And you may say, okay, it's very, very simple, but also how do I do this? All this is great. But I mean, if I'm faced with a problem, I become uncertain, I become afraid, I become, I don't know what to do. So how do I do that? And this is what we are going to do starting, from now on. So there are actually certain actions. I would like you to understand this, and maybe if you want to make some notes, you can. So how do we do the shift, like I said? So we do the shift by creating your own context, and you create this context from hard trends. Like I said, technology is a hard trend. There are other hard trends, and you do this in 3 categories, and let's try and understand how do we do that. So one is demographics. You have to be clear about the demographics which is prevailing in that situation which you are looking at. The second is regulatory aspects. Are there any regulations? And we will look at this from an example, then maybe it will become a little clearer. And the number 3 is technology. So 3 things: demographics, regulatory, and technology. So let's take an example, otherwise you will not understand. And so this is the kind of inquiry that you will do for each of these things, and there are some questions there. But I'm going to take an example of, okay, I'll take the example of travel, okay? I know that industry, aviation industry, somewhat. So, and so let's look at the demographics. The customer base going forward, and I think all of us realize that may be very different, with young people and budget travelers actually predominate. Business and elderly travel could significantly decline because, very youthful population, more travel, the elderly are afraid, and so holiday travel could actually start declining, at least for some time, because of the COVID and because of the fears. What implications this could have with regard to the aircraft itself, seating, all these things. And there are these questions which are there. If I were to be looking at the regulatory from an aviation point of view, there's a hard trend that new safety protocols change, and which would lead to a change in the booking process. Example, pre-flight testing, need for registration of your previous past travels, needing to travel with your vaccination certificate, all that will be there. How could airlines proactively cooperate with each other and regulators and others in the ecosystem. There could be hotels, there could be travel companies and so on, to ensure a smooth and consistent customer experience without compromising safety. Now, see, when you start looking at these questions, these are new questions. But if I keep on trying to, whip all my previous knowledge about how the aviation industry was working, it doesn't work going forward. If I were to be looking at technology here, so going forward, you will have contactless handling at the airport. There'll be hardly any counters. So boarding pass issuer, baggage check-in, etc., already happening, and it'll become more and more. It'll become universal. Seat allotment might need to be looking at in terms of age, demographics, social distancing requirement, and so on. Could you reimagine what you could do possibly with the additional space that might be opening up on board? With young people traveling around. This is the kind of inquiry which you can do with regard to that. First, step one that we talked about. So it is, once I do this, I have created my context. And I've created a context based on hard trends. These are not assumptions. These are hard trends. We, unfortunately, are we start making assumptions and then we start taking decisions. When you start taking decisions with very clear questions like this, you are making it based on hard trends. Action 2. Now you created a context, in step 1. In this step, you make the following for yourself and your organization. Okay? So what you do is you start listing of all things you are certain of. You are certain of. Okay, you know these things. You list all things you know. For example, if you are an accounts, trained person, you're an accountant, you know how to read a balance sheet. You know how to, keep separate kind of cash flow statements. You know how you could do basically a budgetary analysis and so on and so forth. Similarly, if you are good in something else, you know certain things. This is what you know. And the third is list of all the things you can do. Now just stop. I'm stopping here for a minute. Do you realize what I'm trying to do? I am trying to shift ourselves from that unknown, fearful, dark space to a space where there is light. And once I start shifting myself into things which I am certain of, which I know can do, immediately possibilities start showing up for me. I am standing in the cause side of a situation rather than in the effect side of a situation, if I may use another term. When I stand in the effect, things it always happen like this, it will happen like this. That becomes my default future. But when I stand and look at things which I'm certain of, things that I know, things that I can do, once you do that, you start you will start seeing, and you try this, you will start seeing possibilities showing up. And action 3, 1 hour a week, I request you. That's it. You're going to do 1 hour a week. Unplug yourself from the present, and plug into the future. Okay? What does that mean? You actually start determining the hard trends and you become anticipatory. So like I said, certain of things I know, things I can do. As you practice this, every week you say 1 hour, I'm not going to think about all my issues, current issues, past issues. I'm going to be just looking into the future. How does the future look like? What is the future that I would like to create? And as you practice, you become more proficient to determine the hard trends. And you actually would become anticipatory as you develop the capacity for what I call future back thinking. A future back thinking is nothing. Let's assume that you say, like, look, 5 years from now, I want to be an IAS officer, or I want to be a technologist, or I want to have my own startup. Let's say you have that vision, Now, you stand in that future 5 years from now or 3 years from now. Look back. Imagine you've already achieved that. Stand there and look back and look at today and then wonder, what is it I can do today in terms of strategy, in terms of actions, which would make that future happen? You need to train yourself to do this. It's easier said than done. It's an exercise which is doable, but it takes practice. Okay, so this is your action number 3. And let's look at, I'll do a quick example to show you how possibilities can be created. So I want you to imagine, okay? Imagine that you are on snow peaks on a snow slope and you're skiing. I want you to imagine yourself, in winter you have gone to Kulu Manali or somewhere in Kashmir or maybe somewhere in Switzerland. Imagine that you are in a lake in a motorboat. Third thing, imagine that you are on a bicycle. Can you see a bicycle there? Okay, you are imagining all these 3 things. Imagine that you have gone to a toy shop and you see this toy tank. Okay, now I want you to imagine all these 4 things. Now remove. I am asking you to remove certain things. From the remove the skis from you're wearing skis, remove the skis. I remove the outboard motor from that motorboat. Remove the handle from the cycle and remove the tread from that toy tank. Now I want you to imagine with these 4 things, you are still on that ski slope, the snow-clad slope. What do you think emerges when you put all those removed parts together? What you can get is a snowmobile. This is how you imagine, how possibilities can be made to show up for you. This is just a very simplistic example, but I want you to see that when you think out of the box and you start thinking of how certain things can be put together to make something which you never thought was possible. The inquiry which you could do at this stage are these. So, you could do inquiry like, what sectors, institutions will endure? You can think of, you are into some domain and you can think of whether your domain is the right domain or do you need to get retrained. Where you think of what sectors, institutions will endure, which will be impacted negatively, so on. What would be the impact on industry as a whole? What implications could that have on your sector, your organization? This comes from a point, I'm looking at it from the context of you working somewhere. If you're not working somewhere at this point of time, which I realize you may not be, but I want you to think, this is the kind of thought discipline that you need to develop. Where do we see a lack of cooperation or regulatory support? Could we do something about that? What kind of enhancement of our digital presence would we need to do to ensure several things: operational efficiency, logistics, etc., manpower profiling, competitive advantage? What technology trends would impact us, impact me? What kind of changes might take place in the market segments, customer profile? So all kinds of inquiry questions show up, when I'm sort of starting to look at possibilities. Action 4. In this digital era, which in another language I would use the knowledge and the technology era, which is the hard trend, which we know is happening, will keep on happening. First thing, I use the phrase called relational assimilation, which is nothing but stakeholder concerns and interests. And who are the stakeholders? You can see this particular chart here. So this awareness that who all are actually holding a stake in a decision in terms of a disruptive situation. Am I keeping everybody's concerns and interests as part of my way forward perspective? Very, very important. We sometimes forget this aspect. There could be customers, there are suppliers, employees, society at large. They are a very big stakeholder. Government, okay, the community at large, so on. So stakeholder concerns and interests become paramount in this knowledge and technology era where we are going to be faced and are facing increasingly disruptive situations. The next thing, honor your word, and we will get into all of these in a little more detail. Integrity, which I call integrity. Being and acting consistently with who you are. Authenticity, and the third is active listening. These three things, should be based on which your leadership context needs to be created. Because you have your skilling knowledge, accountant, engineer, like any other background, data analytics, but that is only one aspect. That will throw a light on a situation. It will not give me the possibilities. What will give me the possibilities is creating a context for myself. And the four things is be very conscious that everybody's concerns and interests need to be taken on board. And then the three things about integrity, authenticity, and active listening, we'll see how these three things actually happen. And this would lead to an upswing in empathy, respect, and trust. A situation about which we have no past precedents and we really do not know what to do, it is very important that there has to be an upswing in these three aspects. Empathetic about each other, respecting each other for who they are and what they are bringing to the table, and trust. And now, what is integrity for a person? I like to use, it has no morals or no, religious overtones here. Integrity is really about you being your word, nothing more, nothing less. And what exactly do I mean when I say you being your word? What constitutes one's word? Integrity is, and we will talk about what the word is. Integrity is honoring one's word. What is that? When you say honoring your word, does it mean that I have to do every time I've said I'm going to do it to you? No, I'll never be able to do that. So it is honoring your word is whenever you have said, you have declared, you have told somebody I'm going to do this by such and such time, you try to do it. And if you're not able to do so, as soon as you know you are not able to do so, you inform all the affected parties that, look, ladies and gentlemen, and I said I'll do it. I cannot do it because something else has come up. However, I will do this by such and such time frame, or I'll do something else by such and such time frame. And since I had given you a commitment and there is an expectation, I'm willing to deal with any mess that may occur. So honoring of your word is not keeping your word. Honoring of your word is this. If you can just practice this once a day in your life, with your acquaintances, with your other people, your friends, with your family, you will see the upsurge of everything in your life. And it is not theory. There are companies which actually did this, and they found that the leadership and performance indices went up by 7 times. Just one aspect about honoring your word. Integrity, which is honoring your word, leads to improved workability, leads to effectiveness, which is a leadership cascade really, So integrity becomes a necessary condition for effectiveness, performance, leadership in the digital era. There could be other things. How I see a situation, my competences, my skills, and so on. But integrity is a very important part of all this. Along with this, in terms of how my ability to see a situation based on my belief systems and so on, and my skills and competences, if I can bring in integrity, which I need to, that is what is needed in the digital era, about where we do not have past to actually guide us. Being authentic, being and acting consistent with who you are to yourself. We are not. You will realize that we always try to show up as somebody else. When leading, when you lead, when you are leading in leadership roles, when you are authentic, you will see that you are grounded, and you can be straight and without using force. You don't need to force. What triggers our inauthenticities? Three things really. The need, and all of us have this, to be admired. Oh, if you see the inner me, you'll feel poorly, you think poorly of me. So I need to be having this facade. I show up as somebody a little different from who I am. I may not be seen as loyal, so I need to be seen as loyal, to my friends, to other people. I need to look good. I'm, every time, when I go to work, I need to look good. This is what triggers our inauthenticity. Now, how do you shift from an inauthentic space to that of an authenticity? You start by doing a very simple thing. Start becoming aware, being authentic about your own inauthenticities. Don't have to do anything else. Every time I'm being inauthentic, I say, see, I was inauthentic in that situation. At least start becoming. And as you do this more and more, you will start seeing yourself automatically becoming more and more authentic. Authenticity in the digital era is again a very, very important aspect. And the third, what I call is active listening. And what exactly is active listening? Now you may wonder that, look, when I'm saying this, and I may be assuming that whatever I am saying, the way I'm trying to convey is getting conveyed to you. Fact of the matter is, it is not. I realize that. I may be saying it in a particular situation with a particular nuance. I want to stress some aspect about my communication. And you are going to be doing a communication, I think, session after this. I heard Neha saying that. Active listening is that certain kind of listening that leaves me, the speaker, complete. And how does it leave me complete? When I start experiencing that what I was trying to communicate has actually got communicated. So listening is not about hearing. Listening is what I have communicated has really got communicated in the manner and in the context that I wanted it to be communicated. When that happens, that is active listening. And there are ways to do it. But when you do active listening, it leaves the speaker complete. And when it leaves the speaker complete, the speaker now knows, oh, see, what I wanted to say, I have said, and it has been understood, I am satisfied. The grip about my need to communicate, and you're not able to understand, and you're not listening to what I'm trying to say, that grip has gone. And when the grip goes, then we can engage in a new conversation. Otherwise, our conversation will be round and round this, because I also get a sense that when I'm trying to communicate, it's not getting communicated. So I try to say it in a different way, and then you try to listen in a different way, and goes on and on. The space for a new future gets created when you learn the ability to do active listening. So active listening is three things really. Please, every time, and practice this once a day. Listen, one conversation, select, and then you tell yourself, I will hold no intention. I have no intention in listening. I will not judge what is being said to me when I listen. And I will not keep on saying, oh, right, wrong, right, no. What this fellow is saying, Shakti Ghoshal is saying, I don't agree. Or no, I think he's right. Or he is not really right. I keep on judging. I keep on saying, no right, no wrong. This, when I tell myself I'm not going to listen without these three things, no intention, no judgment, no right or wrong, then, that becomes active listening. Now, there are some very nice ways to, and I'll show you. Look at these. These are some the phrases which one could use. So when you start using these phrases, you actually are supporting active listening. So I'm saying something and you say, okay, I see you. Or without really, when I'm saying something and you say, oh, go on, tell me more. And I said something and then you say, look, I'll paraphrase. What I heard you say is that the problem you seem to be seeing, you see, because I said the problem. I said that the problem is this. You're not agreeing. You're not agreeing to what I'm saying. You're only paraphrasing what I said. You are listening effectively. Active listening, effective listening is not agreeing. Active listening is allowing exactly what has been said to land for me in the manner it was said. If I understand you correctly, you are saying that we should. You're not agreeing with me. You are only paraphrasing. Your major point is this. You feel that we should. You feel strongly that you do not. So it's all about conveying that what you listened was exactly, and that is when the space starts getting created. Like I said, the inquiry could be all these questions. Data sources validation. Are you making any assumptions? Who are your stakeholders? What are their interests and concerns? We talked about stakeholder interests and concern. What new conversation could you start? Because, we get stuck. As we are faced with a VUCA environment situation, we get stuck. We go round and round and round and round trying to find out a way using my past, and I don't able to. So, but when I start new conversation, that new conversation can support me to start looking at possibilities. And also the new conversations could support me to negate the effect of past lack of honoring my word. I had said something to you, I did not do it. Now can I make up? In what areas do you feel a loss of personal effectiveness? You need to ask yourself this question. What are you pretending, avoiding, not taking responsibility for? The aspect about authenticity. Why am I being inauthentic in this situation? Why am I being inauthentic with this individual? What conversations need to be created that would alter how the situation occurs for stakeholders? So, these are the kind of questions that you could be asking yourself. It's a journey. There is no mountaintop. You need to enjoy the climb. So, like I said, integrity, authenticity, active listening, even from this particular session, you can take back one out of this and say that, look, I'm going to be practicing this. You'll see how increasingly effective your leadership would be in today's times, in the digital era, when we increasingly cannot depend on our past precedences. These 4 action steps, which we just now saw, would support you to define and move on the leadership pathway to the digital era world. And I believe, I firmly believe that, like I said, even one of that you start practicing and doing, it will take you on a. So in the ultimate analysis, the digital era leadership is all about really, and I'm just now bringing everything together, the ability to see, comprehend, and therefore engage with situation and life differently than most of us do. Most of us become reactive when we are not able to understand. When I shift from that reactivity, looking at my past, solutions and try to use that to a world of possibilities, I start seeing it differently than most of us do. Extraordinary leaders see and come to live in a different world. It is, they may be coming into this situation, but they see the situation differently. With that, thank you very much. If anybody has anything about the slides, I'm keeping the slides here. Otherwise, I'll go out and then we can engage in. So we are 4 minutes in advance and we can do the Q&A.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Shall I move out of this slideshow?
Yes, sir. You can do that.
Okay. Okay.
All right. So I think the entire presentation has been so thought-provoking, right? Because in our day-to-day lives, we're occupied with so many things that we do not really get a chance to sit and think about all these significant happenings in our lives. And I think it has given a lot of clarity on a lot of issues as well. So I will now open the floor for some questions, and I will request people to either unmute yourself and ask the questions, or maybe drop it in the chat box. But so I have one question for you. Um, Especially because of the COVID situation, each one of us, and this is one of the queries that we receive very often at Moolya Foundation, that everybody has started spending a lot of time on social media, right? And the number of hours that people spend on social media has increased drastically because of the COVID and the lockdown situation, right? So what happens is an individual has a specific aim in their lives, right? They know that this is what they want to achieve. But because of regular use of social media and seeing what other individuals are up to, there is a feeling of FOMO. They fear being missed out of a lot of things that's happening. And what's happening because of all of this misinformation or all of this over information, I would say, the actual aim of life is being missed out. There's heaps of expectations from themselves that everybody tends to create, and they forget what their actual goal in life is. So in these situations, how do we make sure that the youngsters today are very motivated and focused and not really being driven away by seeing what others are doing around?
That's a great question, Neha. Lovely, really. And okay, I'll take you back to what I sort of actually showcased as part of my PowerPoint. And if you recall, I did talk about the granular nature of our world and the 24/7 connectivity right in the beginning.
Right.
You and I cannot wish it away. That's the way the world is. Each of us are connected with each other in unknowable ways. Now, the point is that, if I tell you, oh, don't do it, it will not happen that way. The only thing is that the need for me to shift at least some part of myself or a part of myself, or at a point in time, to start visualizing a future that I would like to have for myself. I'm not talking about creating future for anybody else. We are intrinsically selfish creatures. Humans are selfish creatures. Whatever you and I may think or say, we are. We, first and foremost, it's me, mine, myself. So if I am wanting to create a future, I obviously should be passionate about creating that future. And what I showed you with regard to that step 1, step 2, step 2, step 3, and step 4 is a process of at least, first of all, visualizing that future. Second is starting to take some actions to move in that direction. And as I start moving in that direction, and as I start spending some time and my let's say competence to be moving in that direction improves as I practice, 2 things will happen. One is I will start developing these filters inside me, which will be filtering out information which are not so relevant or which are contrary to my future or the vision that I have created for myself. So it'll come and it'll land, but I will not hear. There is no active listening in those with regard to that. So the filtration is allowing only certain kinds of information which is supporting me to move forward. To that extent, social media and this connectivity actually can be a huge accelerator for me. I did not look at it negatively. It's only a question of how I can sort of create a positive filter which allows the good things, or rather the things, not good, bad. There is no judgment here. Good for me, maybe bad for you, and so on. But I allow that which supports my movement, that future which I want. And that is how social media could be handled. This is my response to you. I don't know if I answered your question.
No, absolutely, sir. I think the way to go ahead with this is making sure there is a filtration process in terms of the content we consume during the day, because subconsciously a lot of these things might affect you and you won't even realize. So having a filtering in all of that is something which is very critical. Thank you for that, sir. All right. So do we have any other questions? Anybody willing to ask any questions?
Hello, sir.
Yes,
Uh,
Jason,
yes, sir.
is that
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. As in this
yes?
era,
Jason, we
we are
can't see you. Would you
okay,
like
sir.
to use your
Yes,
camera, or you don't want to use your camera? It's
yes, sir. I
always
would.
nice to see the person.
Yes, sir. Hello,
Yes,
sir.
yes, Jason, good to see you. Yeah.
Yes, sir. As in this era, we are getting more and more choices. With the emergence of digital era, we are getting more and more choices in our life. So as it's also a privilege to get these choices, but at the same time it's also like a curse that we now hold have to hold the responsibility of all these choices. Like if I tried engineering, then I have to hold responsible that why didn't I choose the field of medical, like likewise. So how can we cut off all those choices in our life and don't have regrets in our life in the future, uh, like we can be satisfied with our choice even if we didn't get what we expected from life. So that's my question, sir.
Wonderful question. Actually, what you asked, Jason, is really, to me, it goes into the realm of philosophy, really. Why I say that is, uh, uh, you know, a choice is a choice because I see it as a choice. Okay. Like I was just responding to Neha also a little while back. Uh, Possibilities would be there, but I need to be looking internally, because at the end of the day, I need to be clear, at least to myself, what is it that I would like to do. You said engineering, you said medical. I know it is not easy. I mean, in long years back, maybe a little even younger to what you are, I had the same quandary. I was in a quandary. I was not clear what I'm going to do with my life, and I understand. I absolutely realize that. But the point I'm making is, there will be at least one or two areas which switch you on. Um, for example, societal pressure is wanting you to become either a data scientist, or an engineer, or an IT fellow, or maybe a doctor, right? I'm just saying, society, and that is a societal pressure. My parents want, expect that. My friends and my acquaintances expect that. Uh, in their eyes, I will go up. If I do these things and do them well. So that is the expectation pressure that comes from all of us. And that's how it is. We can't wish it away. But there will always be something inside you about which you are passionate about. Now, I do not know what you are passionate about, but it just could be, and I'm taking a very wild guess, that you may be very passionate about archaeology. You may be very passionate about literature. You may be very passionate about music, right? There is a passion. Now, you may be thinking that, but archaeology is a bad area. I can't do a job. Or music, I know music is a great passion, but I cannot become Lata Mangeshkar or Kishore Kumar, or even Sonu Nigam. So what do I do? So the point is that awareness of a passion has to be there first and foremost. And once you are clear about a passion area, and if you can start investing a certain amount of time and energy into developing that passion area, you will yourself start becoming much happier. Number one, you will become much more confident about yourself in terms of the ability to take a decision about yourself. Now, that eventually, that self awareness in terms of becoming more self-reliant, becoming more aware of who I am, leads to self-confidence. Once you develop that confidence, and that confidence will only come when you start energizing, fueling that passion area of yours. If you leave that aside and I say, no, I want to, then that may not be the right. So, invest in that passion, and then that passion itself, you will become much more self-disciplined to be able to take worthwhile decisions about maybe your career choice. And maybe, just maybe, there could be a synergy between a passion area and your career choice. And if that happens, you are a very lucky person. It may not happen all the time, but at least the clarity will come. I don't know if if I could answer your question, but that's the only response that comes to my mind.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. That answered my question, sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zishan, for that question. Do we have anybody else with a question here? Feel free to write it in the chat box or unmute yourself. Still. All right. So, sir, I feel we have overshot the time by around 5 to 7 minutes. Okay, so I see there's one question. So maybe we can take this last question. So this is from Rohan. Asks, how do we make people flexible in their approach, especially government officials? Because many people in the government sector are quite complacent. So how do we make sure in the approach? What do we do about it?
Good question. I'm tempted to answer how Mahatma Gandhi answered about 100 years back. Maybe, start being the change you want outside. We need to start working on ourselves rather than focusing our energy on who's not doing what they are. If I focus on myself and start developing myself, and we saw how we could develop ourselves, over a period of time, you will see the importance of this lack of complacency, this complacency, this lack of proper or friendly approach towards people by quote unquote some sections of the government structure or society or something. The importance of these in our eyes will go down. I cannot change others. I can only lead from my own side, and leaders need to be the best followers at times. Then only they become good leaders. So let's not, the expectation that everything should be perfect around me and then only I'll perform doesn't happen in life. There will be the good parts and there will be the not so good parts, and we have to be able to optimize our way forward, keeping both these perspectives in mind. That's the only response I can give you. I mean, what can I say? How do we make people, less complacent? I mean, they have to become less complacent. We can only lead by example.
Rohan, I hope you got the answer that. And I think I specifically like when you said, sir, that leaders sometimes should be followers as well, because there's so many things happening around us and we always need to pick up what is the best for us. So I think that's a very wonderful way to conclude this session for today, sir. And for anybody who might have any other questions, maybe you can drop it in the chat box and we can check with sir later on, or maybe you can reach out to sir directly over email and maybe he will take your questions. But overall, I think the session has been a very nice, motivating session for each one of us to understand where are we, because, for the last 1.5 years because of the lockdown, everybody has been in such a stuck situation that they really don't know what is the way forward, right? There are so many uncertainties in terms of what the future looks like. So especially for people who will be graduating very soon, or when somebody has to choose on the correct path for their careers. So I think this has been more of an enlightenment session for all of us. And can we, it has been like, it's always great to have you, speak with you, and I really hope in the future we can have such lovely conversation with you again, sir. So I think somebody is asking if they can have the presentation. Shrey Madan.
You have a YouTube, no? You have it put. I was seeing that it is on YouTube, so they can see it on the YouTube. The full presentation is there on YouTube.
Absolutely. So Shrey, in case you want to access the presentation, I think the best platform for you to just go and read.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much, sir, for your time, and looking forward to more such conversations with you. Sure. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure as always, Neha. All the best to you and all the best to all the students. And I wish you great future. And if at any point of time you want to reach out to me, feel absolutely free. I'm happy to support.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.